Greetings, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to Serial Season 3, The Story of Zeitoun. We spent a lot of time learning about this event and are very anxious to get started.
During this episode, me and Anna Robinson will be giving you a detailed synopsis of Abdurrahman Zeitoun's experience with Hurricane Katrina, the people he met, the conditions of the storm, the aftermath, and his time in prison.
To start off, we'll introduce you to characters in Zeitoun that have the biggest roles in this story.
So the list goes. Abdurrahman Zeitoun, nicknamed Zeitoun, has 3 daughters with Kathy, Nadima, Safia, and Aisha. Kathy is Zeitoun's wife. She was married to another man before Zeitoun and had 1 son with him, named Zachary. Zeitoun and Kathy own a painting contractor business, and Kathy is basically the secretary. Ahmad is Zeitoun's brother, with which he has the closest relationship with.
The majority of the story takes place in New Orleans, Louisiana, but it also switches between flashbacks to Syria and Kathy's point of view in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Phoenix, Arizona.
On August 26, 2005, Zeitoun has the flashback about his home city in which he reminisces the times with him, his father, and his brother would go fishing back in Syria. He then suddenly wakes up from what he called a tattered memory caught in a dream and proceeds to go on with his day. This would be a normal day for him and his family. The kids attended school, Kathy took the regular phone calls from clients, and Zeitoun went off to work. Although everything seemed fine, something catastrophic was coming their way. A storm.
The first person of the Zeitoun family to hear about the storm is Kathy. While she is driving the children to school, she hears a weather report on the radio and becomes nervous. After the kids are dropped off, she calls Abdurrahman. She presents him with the idea of evacuation, but he is stubborn and shuts her down.
As the day continues, Kathy encounters more reports about the upcoming storm. She then hears a story about a family lost at sea, which makes her even more inclined to want to evacuate. In fear for her and her family's safety, she brings the topic up to Zeitoun once again. He agrees. He thinks that the kids and Kathy should leave, but he insists on staying to watch over their home and work sites.
The next day, Saturday, August 27th, Kathy and Zeitoun learn that the storm has been classified as a hurricane. Once again, Kathy tries to convince Zeitoun to leave with her and the kids, but she is rejected, even after Michael Brown, leader of FEMA, told the citizens to evacuate. Kathy finally gives up and takes the kids to her family's home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
During Kathy's long drive to Louisiana, we learn a lot about her. She reflects on how difficult her relationship between her and her family has been ever since she converted to Islam. Her relationship with her mother is somewhat complicated considering the fact that she sometimes criticizes her for wearing her hijab, but is quick to shut down anyone who also tries to do so. We learn from Kathy's childhood through her thoughts. We learn that she was neglected as a child, and as a result, Yuko, one of Kathy's best friends, is introduced into the novel.
In New Orleans on Sunday, August 28th, Hurricane Katrina becomes even more deadly. It's classified as a Category 5 storm. Because of this, Mayor Nagin issues a mandatory evacuation. Stubborn Zeitoun still stays. The nervousness he feels over the potential damage to his home and other properties outweighs the certain danger of the hurricane. Kathy, worried about the storm, calls Zeitoun, but he has limited battery life and the conversation is short. It mostly consists of Kathy trying to convince him to evacuate safely. As the hurricane hits New Orleans, Zeitoun spends his time babysitting the leaks that pop up in his house. The next morning, after his home suffered light scrapes and bruises, Zeitoun has the ability to go outside and explore. The streets are submerged in 18 inches of water, so he paddles for a little while, since floating in the middle of the street is most likely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, unless you're living in Venice, Italy. He reckons that the damage caused by the storm is not too bad and will most likely be sustained in a few days. During this, kids suffer power outage at his sister's home in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The next day, Zeitoun proposes that Kathy and the children come home, but Kathy chooses to wait it out at her sister's house.
Tuesday, August 30th. Zeitoun wakes up on Tuesday to find that the backyard is completely flooded. The levees had broken and the water is from the lake. Zeitoun decides to phone Kathy and makes the decision to move the family's most prized possessions to the upper half of their home, while 6 feet of water fills his living room. By the evening, their home is about submerged by 9 feet of water. Zeitoun registers that the family will have no choice but to rebuild. It'll take years and millions of dollars to rebuild New Orleans. Zeitoun and Kathy speak briefly on the phone because he will not be able to charge it when the battery dies due to the power box being underwater.
In Baton Rouge, Kathy and her sisters are bickering nonstop. They criticize her for going out with the kids and will not give Adnan and Amir, who are friends of Kathy and Zeitoun, a place to stay in Baton Rouge. During this, Zeitoun finds a photograph of his brother Muhammad, who was a fantastic long-distance swimmer who died in a car accident at 24. That night, Zeitoun sleeps on the roof because his house has become too hot for comfort.
The next morning, the city is completely flooded. Zeitoun decides to take out the canoe once again, with the intent to be an explorer, see things first. He observes the broad economic and human ruin caused by the storm. As he continues on his journey, he passes one of his many clients, Frank Noland. Zeitoun brings him along for the ride to check out his other properties.
On their way, Zeitoun and Frank hear shouts from a woman in need of help and paddle their way to the flooded home. The elderly woman, who is overweight and exhausted, needs assistance. Zeitoun and Frank, unable to assist the woman themselves, they gain the help of 2 men in a fishing boat. They are able to lift the elderly woman into the boat and get her and 4 other people they were able to rescue to safety. While Zeitoun is spending his time in New Orleans, helping elders and any other citizens in need of assistance, Kathy finally gets word of how serious the conditions are. In her ongoing attempt to get Zeitoun to leave, once again with no success, she begins to genuinely fear for his safety because of all the talk about robbery and assault going on in New Orleans. However, Zeitoun seems to be just fine. Some might even say enjoying himself. He declares that he finally feels like he has a purpose and finally has something to do, which ultimately turns into his reasoning for staying. Around the same time, Zeitoun encounters 4 dogs who he begins to tend on the daily by bringing them food and water right before heading off to a landline on one of his properties to make his daily call to Kathy at noon. On Friday, September 2nd, Zeitoun decides to take his canoe out again to check on his property. He notices that the floodwater is contaminated from all the waste and trash. On his way, he sees a group of dangerous men. They are looting and are armed. In an act to try and avoid a run-in, Zeitoun continues on his merry way. After checking the building, he decides to go to Tulane University to scope the Muslim Student Center. The center is run by a friend of his. He is met with Nasir Dayoub, who was staying at the shelter to stay away from the floodwater. Nasir tags along with Zeitoun. On their way back, they meet Alvin and Belula Williams, who are unable to evacuate their home. Zeitoun and Nasir set off to look for assistance in helping the Williams out of their home, but they don't have much luck. After almost being shot by one group of soldiers, they are hesitant to approach the second, but go anyway. The group of soldiers promise to send help to the Williams in about an hour, but they never show up. And since they never show up, Zeitoun becomes filled with anger and decides to take matters into his own hands when he encounters his friend Todd Gambino, who has a motorboat. He sends him off towards the Williams home. The following day starts off very ordinary, though. Zeitoun takes the meat from his fridge, eager to get rid of it, and feeds it to the dogs. He then rides his canoe around the neighborhood only to come across dogs that have been shot in the head and bodies that are floating head down in the flood. Helicopters fly over the scene to take pictures, but none even try to help. Zeitoun finds himself feeling like it is his duty to help others since no one else seems to be doing so. Tuesday morning, Nasir decides that it's time to leave. He collects his items and is ready to go, but cannot because the rescue helicopter has crashed. Zeitoun finally feels the need to leave as well because for the first time he doesn't feel needed anymore. It also makes him feel anxious how polluted and violent New Orleans is getting day by day. He speaks with Kathy and insists that the children be put in school because he knows the rebuilding of the city will take longer than expected. After this, he goes out on the canoe again and ends up being interviewed by a news crew. He talks of what he has witnessed and who he has assisted and is off again. He visits the buildings and meets Ronnie. Ronnie has been breaking in to use the phone. Zeitoun lets Ronnie ride back with him. They take showers and Zeitoun updates Kathy once again when a group of men show up at the door.
Later that day, Kathy begins to worry about Zeitoun's whereabouts since he hadn't called her at noon, the same way he had ever since she left New Orleans. She becomes incredibly anxious and immediately begins to call friends and family. Yet, no one knows anything about where Zeitoun may be. Kathy even ends up calling Zeitoun's brother, Ahmad, who basically takes charge of the situation and begins to call the Coast Guard, Red Cross, or any organization who can help him identify if Zeitoun is safe. Meanwhile, Kathy pretends to be fine for the sake of her children, who soon begin to catch on to the fact that no one has heard from their father for a while. Days pass by and Kathy continues to worry. She even ends up filing his information into a missing person organization created by the Red Cross. She begins to overthink and consider that Zeitoun may be dead. Her thoughts lead to her deciding that she's going to head back to New Orleans to try and find him. But that idea is quickly shut down because of the fact that the city is closed.
Going back to Zeitoun during this time, Tuesday, September 6th, as he opens the door, he is met with 7 armed law enforcement officers. The officers end up arresting everyone who's currently present in the house: Zeitoun, Nasser, Ronnie, and Todd Gambino. Todd had arrived at the same time they were leaving as prisoners. The group of men originally thought they were being evacuated, but this was not the case. They were taken to a makeshift prison that was originally a bus station.
At the makeshift prison, Zeitoun and Todd are interrogated because they're believed to be part of Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group, only because of their race. Next, the authorities interrogate Nasser and they discover that he has $10,000 in cash in his duffel bag. Not only that, but they also find out that Todd has a camera SD card, $2,400, and MapQuest prints. Following their interrogations, Zeitoun is forced into a closet in which he has to strip naked and be searched in his rectum for any contraband items. Once the authorities fail to find anything, they shove him and his friends into a cold and dirty cell and feed them pork, which because of their religion they cannot eat. This cruel treatment goes on for months, Zeitoun and his friends being treated as though they were not human until it was finally over.
Kathy thought Zeitoun was dead until she received a call one day while still staying in Phoenix. The first call was from the missionary, and the second call was from Homeland Security, saying that the charges against Zeitoun have been dropped. But when Kathy calls the correctional facility, they have no recollection of Zeitoun ever being there. She travels to New Orleans to meet with a lawyer. During this, Zeitoun has no clue whether or not the missionary or Homeland Security have called. His bail had been set at $75,000, and he is also issued a court date. But Kathy was not able to find the location of it due to it being private information. She starts to bring attention to the situation by calling friends and talking to CNN about their story. Eventually, Zeitoun is released on bail after the rental space was put up as backing.
After Zeitoun returned, it was time to rebuild their home and their lives back in New Orleans. They ended up buying 2 properties in which they planned on rebuilding. As a family, the Zeitouns are doing their best to try and repair the damage done, both physically and mentally. However, this becomes difficult because of things such as how Kathy began to struggle with memory loss, how they both had reoccurring symptoms of PTSD, and how the properties they owned became difficult to sell. In the end, Zeitoun is hopeful and believes that one day his business will once again begin to succeed.
This has been Serial Season 3, covering the story of Zeitoun, Patty Juarez, and Anna Robinson. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed.